right. Now we're going to look at examples of problems with student submissions, and so that you could avoid those issues. Now, very important, once again, we have our shutter speed chart. I mean, there's a lot of charts in this assignment. This one is one of the most important, though. Remember, if you want your subject to be nice and sharp, your shutter speed is going to be at 1 over 1,000, 1 over 500, 1 over 25, and so on. The more we progress to the right side, the blurrier the subject is going to be. Now, we're going to look at problems, mainly exposure over and under exposure. Here, we see the image, and this is supposed to be number 1, which is object blurry, background sharp. And we got that, but it's really blown out. And so is our panning. We know from panning we have these horizontal lines. So we know we're letting too much light into the camera. Reviewing their settings, what do we have? ISO 200 on the first one. We want to bring the ISO down to 100. We want to let less light into the camera because they're overexposed for number 1 and number 3. So we're at 25, about right here. I'm moving up my mouse up and down. So I would say F11 would let more, well, actually it's overexposed, so we're letting in too much light. Okay, got it. So I was saying it wrong. We still want to bring too much light. We want to bring the ISO down to 100 for sure. We're at 25, which is close to 32, right in the middle. So we want less light entering the camera. So what would we change it? We want to slow down the shutter. Slow down the shutter to let more light entering the camera. So we're at 1 over 20. I would try 1 over 30, 1 over 15, 1 over 8. Then for the third photograph, panning, it's overexposed. Once again, I would change the shutter speed. And we know they go up to 25, so I bring this up to F25 if they don't have 30. And yeah, I'd work on the shutter speed. That would be the solution for that problem. Let's look at the next one. All of the images are completely overexposed. They're in the right, blurry, not blurry, and all that other stuff, but they're all overexposed. What can we do to fix that? Here's our chart. They're all overexposed. So we need to let less light into the camera. The ISOs for number 1 and 3 are fine at 100. Number 2 should be at 100. The shutter speeds are fine. What we need to do is to increase our f-stop number. We're at F10, and I would go to 16 or 22. So that would be the same thing for numbers 1 and 3. Increase the f-stop number. Let less light into the camera. Number 2, you're at F4. So you have a lot of ways to go. I would say you're at F4. I'd say try F8 or maybe F11. Okay, let me move this out of the way because I'm losing my chart. Here we have an issue of underexposed. Underexposed. It's a little too dark and very dark on this situation. What do we have to do? Let me double check to make sure it's the right person. Yes. All right. So these images, whoa, let's try it again, are overexposed. We need to let in more light. The easiest thing to do would be, with the shutter speeds are fine, to increase your ISO from 400 to 800. Now we see at number 2 he went to 3,200, but it was still too dark. What would be the most obvious solution in this case? That would be letting in more light in your camera, right? You need more light. So the easiest is changing your ISO. If they're already at 3.5, and that is the largest aperture that they have in their camera, they can't go any further on that respect. So in this case, increase that ISO and make it higher. Let more light into your camera. Let's review another one. Same thing here. Overexposed on number 1, but number 2, that's fine, and number 3 is spot on. Let's compare those two number 1 and number 2 in the table. Here we go. So number 1 is way overexposed, and my response would be like, you're at ISO 1000. ISO 1000. That is way too high for that lighting conditions. So I would say try 800 or 400, and that is going to make your image less blown out. But then the question is, why was number 2 okay? Well, look, the shutter speed in number 2 is much shorter, right? And also, he also opened up from 32 to 13. He let in more light. So that is the solution for that one. Let's take a look at one more, or maybe another one. Okay, so here we have a ball, and they're in the wrong order, so let me put them in the right order. And in every case, although the capturing of emotion is right, they're slightly underexposed. Let's take a look at the table. Easiest thing to do in this case is to what? Let's look at our table again. We're at ISO 100 and it's too dark. I would say bring it up to 400. Maybe even 800. I think 400 might do it. And that is going to bring up, I guess you'd start at 200. That's one stop. 2 to 400. And those images are going to be correctly exposed. Here, let's do the last. Well, we have 2 more in the queue. Number 1, overexposed on number 1. Number 2, the exposure is pretty good. And number 3, overexposed. Let's look at our table to make a decision. So, overexposed. And let's bring our chart. ISO is good. The shutter speed recommended is to start off at what? And that answer would be 1/30th of a second. 1/30th of a second, they're at 125. We want blur, so 1/30th. And the f-stop is way over here on the left side. Let's take a look at this photographs one more time. So, too much light entering the camera. Too much light entering the camera for number 1 and number 2. The ISO has to stay at 100. We can't go any lower. Too much light entering the camera. I would recommend to change the shutter speed to 1/30. I would also, too much light entering the camera. The f-stop is okay because she's at 25. It's probably her smallest aperture. So change that shutter speed. I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to seeing your photographs.